It shows that optimism,
Yes.
that path forward. Look at what Governor Newsom just did. We didn't lay down. We fought fire with fire. And, if they want to push us around, guess what? Those days are over of pushing Democrats around, of Democrats being okay with, like the good government in the abstract, the universal disarmament. We're not universally disarmed. You look at the outrages coming out of Texas, and no, we're not just going to sit there in a year and a half and say, oh, I guess we lost the House, but we sure did it by the rules of Robert's order. No, no, no. What he's doing is terrific, Governor Newsom. And by the way, the California Supreme Court just said that he could proceed. And I think they're going to make the decision today to put it on the November ballot. So everybody remember, this is the one. We don't want to do this, but we've really been forced into it. Trump told Texas to do this. Texas is following lockstep, Mark. And California, we have to either respond or we have to roll over and say, well, okay, Trump and Vance or whoever will be in charge of the government for the next decade in both houses of Congress and appoint judge after judge. And we're just going to sit there and spout niceties about good government? No, no, no.
So, David, let me just follow up on that, because you do have, of course, a sunnier disposition toward all of this than do I. I mean, you also know more than do I. So let me just ask you about this political lift that Newsom has to do. You're already skipping ahead of the movie to where we have answered the Texas redistricting with California redistricting, but there is some political real estate between here and there. And so Newsom will have to get a green light from voters to actually go ahead with this, won't he?
That's right. It's in our Constitution. And I saw somebody who I thought was pretty dim-witted on CNN just say over and over again, oh, the governor is violating the constitutional rights of Republicans in this state. That's nonsense. We're allowed to amend the Constitution. And what we would do in November, if this is voted in, is it would amend the Constitution. It would, for a short time, get rid of the independent commissions. The independent commissions are very nice, just like not having nuclear missiles is very nice. But it's ridiculous to not be so nice as to not have nuclear missiles when people are shooting them at you and you unilaterally disarm. So we're not unilaterally disarming, but this has a trigger mark that only goes into effect if Texas or some other red state does it. All they have to do in Texas, and probably Florida is the other state that's really at risk of doing this, maybe Missouri. All those three states have to do is to basically stand down. Ours will not go into effect no matter how overwhelming the vote is for it. But I have to believe just about every Democrat and independent who cares about not having Trump bully us will vote for it, because there's no alternative. I haven't heard one commentator yet say, what's the alternative except, oh, it somehow violates the Constitution and we agreed to a commission a few years ago and we should have an independent, fair commission. Yeah, so should Texas, so should Missouri and Florida. But if they keep pushing us and bullying us, no, we're not just going to be pushed and bullied here in California. It affects the entire House. That's the thing, Mark. This decision in California or that decision in Texas that would go first and hurt us, it affects the entire nation, because the House is right now 3 votes away from being Democratic. And by every trend, it would go Democratic in the next election, in the midterm election. And that's what Trump so much wants to avoid, because then it would be a check on his power and the arbitrary things that he's doing.
Well, I mean, they have passed this congressional map. They did it last night. And I'm wondering, it's interesting. I think I sent it to you, Albert. You have the Obama, he kind of summarizes in a way the way Katz does, the Obama post on X about the problem with doing this, but understanding the urgency of having to do this, which is essentially what you're saying. And I just mentioned Obama because here it is. Thank you, Albert. He says, over the long term, I have trouble reading this because it's so small on my screen, but hang on one second. I'll just, over the long term, we shouldn't have political gerrymandering in America. And he's saying just a fair fight between Republicans and Democrats based on who's got better ideas. But since Texas is taking direction from a partisan White House and gerrymandering in the middle of a decade to try and maintain the House despite their unpopular policies, I have tremendous respect for how Governor Newsom has approached this. He's put forward a smart, measured approach in California designed to address a very particular problem at a very particular moment in time. And so that's, in essence, what you're saying, which is we want to play by the rules, but if you're not going to play by the rules, then we'll try to play by the same reimagined rules that you're playing by. And that's what's happening in California.
It's countervailing. It's countervailing. It's reciprocal, and will never go into effect, even if it gets a huge vote. I think it only has to win by a majority, and it seems to me pretty inevitable it'll win by a majority. Now, some people may say, well, is it really going to work? Because maybe other Republican states will do what Texas is doing. And that's what my comment was, that there's a risk of it happening in Florida. There's a risk in Missouri, very red states where they can pretty much control everything. And Indiana has already said it does not want to do it, although Indiana Republicans control the state. Indiana has, desisted from doing this, or said it will desist. That's a great trend. And then if it actually comes down to that, all three states do it to us, and the other states, on blue states, can see that we're not countervailing it, then New York and Illinois can do this more readily than we can, because we have this constitutional provision right now in the California Constitution that sets up these commissions. And of course, that was a real good government thing. That was all a very nice idea, but it has to be suspended for a while because we're just getting pushed around. It's become unilateral disarmament, and we just can't have that. It's just totally not fair. And you look at what Trump is doing. Let me just make one more comment. He's now really getting into banana republic stuff. I mean, he's going after his enemies for so-called mortgage fraud, which is garbage. It's a lie. But he's just letting the world know that he's got an FBI director and an attorney general who will go after his enemies for really small potato stuff that even if it were so, would not be handled by a federal criminal prosecution. So it's like, as you said before, Mark, many times, they said, for my friends, everything goes. For my enemies, the law. And this idea that I've had mortgage fraud cases that I've defended, somebody who buys 5 or 6 properties and is playing, real games to get lower rates. None of these enemies of Trump, none of these public officials are doing anything like that. So under the guidelines, the federal prosecutive guidelines, none of these people would be investigated for more than, the FBI kind of looking at the documents and saying, no, even if that were so, it's so far from our guidelines, it's such small change. But if you go after those people, I'm even suspicious that those New York Court of Appeals judges have all the respect in the world for judges. But you wonder, if they're scared, because once a president has been this dictatorial and vindictive and said he's going to go after, jaywalking, everybody says, you know what, maybe I did jaywalk. I don't need this. And that's how you get an autocracy, Mark.
Well, that's exactly what I've been saying all along. And I think even in the case to which you've alluded, which is the mortgage thing, which is associated with somebody who's on the Federal Reserve Board, the idea is twofold, I'd suggest. One is you're literally trying to harass her to the point that she resigns, and you're, pressuring her, leaning on her so that you can replace her with one of your own. But then you're also sending a message, and that's kind of what you're saying. And you're sending a message, I made this point yesterday on the air, to the Fed chairman even, saying, dude, I'm not messing around. I'm going after her now, and I can come after you too. You'll play ball, you'll all play ball, or I will ruin your life, and you'll wish you had never come to government. I think that's the message. It's a mafia kind of set. It's a mobster mentality.
Well, I've been saying this, and so have some other criminal defense attorneys for a long time, that because selective prosecution is not treated in the federal courts the way it ought to be, it's very hard to get discovery. It's very hard to even make that claim that you've been selectively prosecuted. And, all the time the Democrats were in power and they didn't really grill nominees to see what their views were on this. Now, unfortunately, those chickens are coming home to roost, that the law on selective prosecution is really bad. Now, Trump may make it easy for them because he makes such stupid statements. Now he's basically said, I'm going after this person. He's giving a lot of evidence. You don't need the discovery, which is very circumscribed by legal doctrines in the federal courts, unfortunately. You don't need the discoveries to find out that, hey, somebody's really trying to get you. Trump announces to the world, I'm trying to get this guy. So that may help them with their selective prosecution. I got to believe if they ever brought charges against Senator Adam Schiff, that any federal judge in America would see that this was selective prosecution, that this is a case that doesn't even have to go to trial because he's been so, selectively prosecuted, so chosen because of his opposition to Trump. I believe that even the Trumpy judges, even the Trump selected judges, I just have that much confidence in the federal courts, Mark.
Yeah, well, you've had a lot of experience in the federal courts, so maybe that confidence is what we all should have. I'm far more cynical, but I did want to mention, because you did mention it, how this appeals court threw out, this just happened this morning, this financial penalty, right? The state judge in New York had posted, I should say, should impose this penalty, and it was a lot of money. They upheld the fraud judgment that involved Trump exaggerating his wealth for decades. But the legal judgment that would have brought down this $500 million fine, that is waived in the appellate court. And I think you were saying, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. I think you were saying, was there a sense that there was a bit of intimidation here, or was there a real legal judgment here that determined, hey, that's an excessive fine?
Well, I have all the respect in the world for judges, and these are the intermediate appellate judges. It's very complicated how the courts are named in New York. There's a superior court, which is the trial court. It's superior to all the municipal courts, to the traffic courts. So the superior court is the trial court. Then there's an intermediate appellate court, and then there's the Court of Appeals, which is the Supreme Court. You'll never figure it out. It'll never matter. So these are the intermediate. It has not gone to the highest state court in New York. It still is going to go there. Probably now on the appeal of both of them. But I guess the point that I'm making is they're human beings, okay? They have all kinds of things that they're doing in life. They have things that their kids are doing in life. And just let's look at it from human nature, whether you're a judge, have a black robe or not, okay? You've done anything wrong in life, okay? You have a right to go on with your life. I mean, that's the reality. People have done a little of this, a little of that. I mean, everyone wants to be Caesar's wife, but you say to yourself, wow, this is unbelievable. This guy's coming after, they're coming after Adam Schiff for something which is so frivolous. The idea that they would never come after me because, they've gotten so much pushback on going after a U.S. senator who hasn't done anything. I don't know. I think it's very, very intimidating because I don't think that decision squares up under the law. Those seem to me like judges who are really worried about affirming this $500 million judgment against Trump, because it seemed to me very, very strong. And can we go over the case just really quickly? Sure. So this is the one. Now people get this all confused because it's a civil case, and they remember the civil case where he also had to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to this E. Jean Carroll. This is the one that he assaulted in the dressing room at Bergdorf Goodman's. And then even after he lost, then he blasted her again. So she had a second complaint against him, and she won even more money on that. So that's hundreds of millions of dollars. And that one is still up on appeal. It's not all those cases with E. Jean Carroll and the sexual assault and the defamation of her. These are the ones where, as you said, for decades, he does a couple of things with the Trump properties. He says they're worth a lot more than they're really worth when he goes to banks. And they said, look, you got $550 million less of loan payments. If you'd have borrowed $2 billion, as you did, let's say it was $2 billion, at the rate they would have charged you had you told the truth, that's $500 million more than the rates that you actually got. So by saying you and I get together, Mark, let's say, and we say, okay, we're going to find some real estate and we're going to tell people that it's worth $2 billion and it's not, okay? Two things could happen. We could just about destroy that bank as we went down, right? Or we could get very lucky and the real estate could go up because it was in Manhattan and it ended up going up. So Trump's defense is that nobody lost anything. Mark, that is not a legal defense. If you and I take a bunch of worthless properties and say they're worth $2 billion, or cheap properties, and we say they're worth $2 billion, and we have the very good fortune that they go up to $3 billion, we've still committed at least a civil tort, if not a crime. That is what this judge said. Trump could have asked for a jury trial. He didn't want a jury trial when he says, oh, I got railroaded by some judge. He could have chosen a jury trial. He didn't want a jury trial in New York City on this. The evidence was so absolutely clear. He went to a judge. That was this Engoron. He thought that was going to help him out. This is the famous one where he says that his apartment is 3 times the physical size that it is and says it's his opinion. No, it's not an opinion when you tell somebody something is 3 times as large geographically as it is. So he overstated all those things. He got much better loan rates. The banks would have charged him $500 million more had he told the truth. The judge said, that's why you owe $500 million. And then the Court of Appeals, this Intermediate Court of Appeals, just threw all that out and said, the banks didn't lose money. It was speculative. There wasn't enough evidence for it. And again, I'd like to really analyze it closely. It just happened today, but it just seems to me like it's wrongly decided. Now, other than that, though, they did say that he was good for fraud. So they upheld the fact that he and his sons were found liable for fraud. It's a civil case, found liable for fraud. And they put a monitor in there to make sure that they didn't keep doing these same sleazy things that were civilly wrong. The monitor is still there. There's still the liability for fraud. So you can still say that they are fraudsters. Smart to add civil fraudsters, but they're still fraudsters. And so they're both going to appeal. And they had nothing nice to say about, it was her name, the attorney general there, Letitia James, that she made comments she shouldn't have made, that she was going to get Trump when she ran. Now, it's so mind-boggling. And the reason I think that these judges are scared of Trump is because it would have been so logical to say, while we condemn the remark that she made during her electoral campaign, the court feels constrained to point out that Trump has made comments 20 times as worse, 20 times more often. If that kind of language is not in there, it looks like an opinion that's designed to get, from Trump's point of view, he doesn't like to be called a fraudster, but he really doesn't like to be ordered to pay $500 million. And if you remember this, he was just about insolvent, Mark, when he was out of office. Do you remember this? He had to run around and post a bond that was about the amount of, so he had to go get somebody he had to pay $500 million, or he had to have somebody to basically say that if he never did pay the $500 million, they would pay the $500 million. It's incredibly hard to get a surety like that. And it looked like even Trump, because he was out of office, he couldn't give all those favors he gives now that the U.S. Supreme Court says he has presidential immunity for. He couldn't give all those favors then because he was in office and he really couldn't raise the money. And then the Court of Appeals bailed him out again. They're supposed to all be Democrats, but they bailed him out again because they said, you don't have to post that much. You have to post only, let's say, 100 million. And then he found somebody. I wonder what that person's fate has been now since they did that big favor for Trump and now he's president again. But anyway, some angel came forth with $100 million. He posted that $100 million. And here we are. It's so depressing, Mark. That's why I showed the happy Katz, because it's really depressing. I mean, what happened to the rule of law?
No, I mean, that's exactly it. I think you're finding that the rule of law is intimidated, and the sort of mobster way of doing business is an effective way to strong arm everything from senators and congresspeople who've been cowed by Trump to judges who you expect to operate in and above a lot of this political partisanship. But they, as you suggest, have real lives and families too. A U.S. judge saying yesterday that the Trump administration is actually in a better position than federal courts to release materials that would satisfy public curiosity about the late financier and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in the sex trafficking case. The Justice Department had made a bid to unseal records from the grand jury that indicted Epstein in 2019. And so there, U.S. District Judge Richard Berman wrote, it was about 70 pages of materials that the grand jury had. I mean, that is specifically relevant because the judge noted that there are 100,000 pages that the government has from its Epstein investigation. So the idea that the 70-odd pages that are part of this grand jury investigation and grand jury testimony, that ain't treasure trove for Epstein. The feds have the treasure trove for Epstein. That's really what the judge has said. So there was never really, as you had indicated, David Katz, any notion realistically that grand jury was that grand jury testimony or other details from the grand jury was really going to get out, was really going to be unsealed. But that was the dance they were doing to address the Epstein bleeding at the time that was going on, the demand for the Epstein files. But now, even in passing on this, where the judge says, no, we're not going to release these, he's going, dude, I don't have a lot of these anyway. Most of the files are there with the U.S. government.
Well, this is a federal judge who did this. Now, of course, a vindictive, lawless administration could go after, picayune things against federal judges just as state judges. There's no immunity A federal judge can get a parking ticket, a federal judge can get a speeding ticket, federal judge can be investigated for absolute nonsense by a vindictive attorney general. We haven't really had that. And by the way, when I talk about fighting fire with fire, I just meant for this particular ballot initiative that I think everyone should vote for in November. We're never going to fight fire by fire, Democrats and people who believe in the rule of law, by doing this to the Republicans or Republican judges or Republican political enemies when Democrats are back in power. You never get down to this level. That's not what I mean by fighting fire with fire. Now, this particular one, Mark, is so disingenuous. It's so stupid. You're right. Rome was burning. Washington was burning. Even MAGA was burning with this demand to get the Epstein files. And of course, Trump had all the power to give the Epstein files. And these people like Bongino, he made a career out of, I guess, working out and going on podcasts and screaming and yelling that the Epstein files are going to nail all these Democrats, all these rich elite Democrats. Oh my God, all they do is they run around and they sex traffic. And then, of course, all of a sudden, Trump's in power. And it's like, ooh, that was an interesting rhetorical point. But, ooh, because they said, Mark, I think there's more than 100,000 pages because they.
Oh, my God, yes. But that's what he said, 100,000. Yeah.
Hundreds of FBI agents. You wonder if they're fighting terrorism. You wonder if some huge fraud, some cyber attacks against America are being handled by the FBI, wiretaps against real organized criminals who murder people to keep them silent. You wonder if the FBI is working on them. Well, you won't be surprised to learn that the FBI was all detailed to Washington, D.C. to go over hour after hour and day after day the Epstein files. You wonder for what reason? And apparently it was to see how often Trump's name was in there, how badly Trump was portrayed in there, how badly his big friends and big donors were portrayed in there. And when he got done doing that, we know that the attorney general said, no, we're not releasing anything. Bongino supposedly went crazy. There's now a second person running the FBI along with him. He's probably going to get phased out. He'll go back on his podcast. He'll make more money than he did in government, but he won't have that kind of sway that he has right now, of course. So it was always ridiculous. They had to come up with something. And the story they did was, well, we'll have the grand jury transcripts released, which had all these wonderful things about it. It was likely not to work, but it sounded good to the average person who thought, yeah, they're doing something. They're getting the grand jury, the secret stuff they're getting released. The grand jury is secret because they talk about people who are innocent in there. But it's not because it's a great source of information. The government has to believe when they present a case to a federal grand jury that they can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. But the legal standard is just probable cause. So what they normally do is they call an agent. And that's what this was. The whole grand jury thing that Trump and Bondi made such a big deal about was nothing but an FBI agent testifying from hearsay. So he says, we've done some investigation. There's this Epstein Island. There's allegations that there was sex with young women down there. We have these flight logs. Trump was on the plane 7 times, maybe if it went to that level of detail. But he didn't go to Epstein Island. He didn't even maybe interview any of these people. He didn't even see the records that Trump had been on the Epstein plane 7 times. What he testified to was just hearsay, a summary of the case, and then the grand jury voted the indictment. And then, of course, there was these hundreds and hundreds of thousands, millions of pages of files that should have been turned over to the defense. And the other thing about Maxwell, we haven't heard about her in a while, but it's obvious that she tailored her story in a way that to get a pardon, because the only thing good that can happen to her, because I do predict this next month that the U.S. Supreme Court will not grant review of her case. Even if they granted review of her case, it's a losing argument. Epstein had immunity in one place. Even if the immunity extended to Maxwell in that one place, Southern District of Florida, she wasn't indicted in that place. So whatever protection she had only in the District of Florida, derivatively from Epstein, she didn't have in New York because New York ain't the District of Florida. So that case is going nowhere. So her only hope of getting out of her 20-year prison sentence for sexually trafficking young girls is to have Trump give her a pardon. Now, people say Trump will never give her a pardon or a commutation. Katz predicts that probably, depending how the case rolls, but I can absolutely see that happening. She'll hold a press conference. She'll say, my God, I knew about all these Democrats. That's why I didn't want to say during the Democrats. I knew the Democrats and Biden weren't going to, because it all was against them. And Trump will say, oh my God, I predicted this woman. I saved this woman from being railroaded and spending all these further years in prison. This is all part of a Biden, conspiracy. If they'd have really had this great stuff against me, they would have released it. And let me just say this, they wouldn't have released it. These guys like Biden and his U.S. attorney and the assistant U.S. attorneys play by the rules. They don't leak stuff. I never leak stuff. There was never a leak investigation in my office. All the years that I was there in the U.S. attorney's office, you play by the rules. Nobody leaks anything. Those grand jury transcripts that are so secret, I never heard of anybody. I'm sure there's some case in America, but not in our office. I never heard of anybody leaking one word of a grand jury transcript. So it's very logical. None of it leaked under Biden. And now it's going to all be packaged in a way to get her a commutation. That is, unfortunately, people say he'll never, ever do that. These were young girls. They were hurt so terribly. If it helps him, Trump will do it.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. This pardon is coming already. You've seen insane amounts of, immediately following the Blanche meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell, I mean, immediately following. I think it was a day later. They move her to this super minimum security facility that is one that no other person, inmate, convicted of sex offenses of any kind is permitted to occupy. She is immediately, again, the ink isn't even dry on whatever deal. She's immediately transferred there, and now she's on like a work release program, or she's on like a, right? It's crazy. I mean, it was so clearly a deal crafted in that moment by Todd Blanche on behalf of Trump.
It's a security level. Someone serving a 20-year sentence and she has about 15 years left to go is generally not put in a camp just because, they could just, a lot of them, you don't even have to go over a wall. I mean,
no, you can walk right off. That's exactly right.
Right. They say that when Milken or somebody else was out here at Lompoc, they had a bicycle and they went into town.
No, I've talked to people. I've talked to people who
that far away, right?
I've talked to you've met with people. I've talked to people who've served time in these specific facilities, and they talk about the fact that, oh yeah, you can walk right off if you want to. I mean, it's not smart to do that because they will come get you and they'll rearrest you, and then you're going to be upgraded to a more medium security place. But that's the nature of the place. It's far more. It's called a camp for a reason. And anyway, she was moved there. And it even cost the American taxpayers more money because they had to apparently increase the amount of security associated with Maxwell's stay there. It's clearly a deal. And so this is my long way of agreeing with you that she will be pardoned at the end of all of this when Trump won't care whether or not there's a hostile reaction or whatever. The cake on that will have been baked. I need to ask you, the DOJ trying to get names and social security numbers of trans kids. They're trying to cull medical data to get information on trans kids in not only a couple of states that are sort of open to that, like Texas and Tennessee. It's kind of already in Texas and Tennessee tried to do this kind of thing. But this is in Philadelphia. The DOJ demanding a Philadelphia hospital hand over a broad swath of information related to gender-affirming care for minors. This includes individual patient names, dates of birth, and social security numbers. This came forward in a subpoena in a court filing this week. Can you speak to this?
Well, I suppose one preliminary issue, just thinking about it, is that if we really believe that the subpoenaing agency was going to hold that inviolate and secret, that might be one thing. But there's no confidence after what we saw with Doge. We saw how records were, there's all these lawsuits about how Doge obtained records, how they disseminated them, how they're trying to use them. They're, of course, trying to use them against the people who are not legally in the country. They're trying to use the Medicaid records and all kinds of other records to actually pinpoint them, find where they are, and to deport them. So, of course, we're very, very worried what misuse is going to be made. In terms of whether the government agency can get this under the subpoena, I imagine every one of these is going to be litigated, Mark. And I think a lot of times the government is going to lose because they're not going to, what do they need this information for? If they're going to cut off funds for a certain procedure, they cut it off for a procedure. What do they need to know that, Johnny Jones wanted to be Janie Jones, and that, Jones had such and such a procedure? What do they really need to know that for? If they're not going to pay for the procedure and it's proper not to pay for the procedure, what do they need to know? Or maybe if they can be redacted. It's so funny. We criminal defense attorneys who deal with the government, everything gets redacted. You get these things that look like cottage cheese. They're all over. Everybody redacts everything. The judges look at you like, what the hell are you trying to find out? And everything's redacted. All of a sudden, the government can't seem to deal with redacted records. What do they need to know what the person's exact date of birth is? Once they know they're 13 and they had such and such a procedure, what do they need to know is Johnny Janie Jones? What do they need to know the person's birthday? Social security number? This is garbage. So I think some federal judges are going to say you can't have it, or they're going to say you can only have it, but heavily redacted. So it's just for the probative purpose that the subpoena is supposedly trying to achieve.
I mean, I don't even know what the probative purpose would be. So
Mark, I suppose if, again, Philadelphia may allow all of those things to be done, but it may be that some things are not going to be paid for by, let's say Medicaid. If Medicaid, what they call the bottom, not the top changes to a boy or girl, but the bottom changes. Let's say that some state is going to not pay for the bottom changes until a person is 17. They could want to make sure that at least ongoing, that or somebody who's had they have something 2 months before, and then the bottom procedure happens 2 months later. You might want to know that this person's age and that they're about to have this bottom procedure, so that you could say, okay, under the law now, we want to make sure that some doctor in Philadelphia doesn't give them round 2, since it's against the law now for round 2. And certainly that would be the Tennessee and Texas justifications, because there's a lot of things that they won't be allowed. So I'm just saying there is some. I mean, it's so easy to be outraged by all this stuff, Mark, and it is outrageous because they have such bad intentions. The people who want to do this to the trans kids. But just imagining what a federal judge would actually do in Philadelphia. It would depend, of course, on what the federal rules were and what the Pennsylvania state laws were.
Okay. I want to finish up with Texas. Apparently there is this 10 Commandments thing. They want the 10 Commandments in every classroom. Now, judge saying that Texas can't require public schools to display 10 Commandments in class. And this is I guess there was, this is like one of those double injunction things, I think, where there was a group of Dallas area families and faith leaders. They wanted a preliminary injunction against the law, which goes into effect September 1st. They say the requirement violates the First Amendment's protections for the separation of church and state and the right to free religious exercise. So this ruling is against this new requirement. And this is where I go to David Katz, who often says they're losing in court. I believe this is the third state that has lost or blocked by a court on this 10 Commandments thing, on this church and state separation. Can you speak to sort of the general premise and then this case in Texas?
Well, this kind of issue, Mark, has bounced around so long. It was on my bar exam. And I didn't take the bar exam just yesterday, because there is this tension between, the free exercise of religion, but also not imposing your religion on people who have a different religion or don't have any, established religion or don't believe in God at all. And all of those people have a right to the free exercise of their religious principles. And then, of course, the parents get involved in these things, and they say, well, I want my child to be brought up with the 10 Commandments in the classroom. And then there's, I think, a rabbi is one of the people involved in this, and saying, well, no, my kids go to a public school and I don't want the 10 Commandments standing there and them being told that, that's part of Christianity, that, that they're being basically brainwashed in a way. So, one thing that always fascinates me, and then the argument by the religious people is not really religious, it's historical. There's a tradition of having the 10 Commandments. Mark, you went to public school like I did. I went before you did. The 10 Commandments were not up. The flag was up, and there was showing you how to print and do cursive writing. Remember that? From A to Z, and the flag was up in the corner, and there were no 10 Commandments. I would believe that these people were interested in our historical traditions of our great religions, if they wanted to have also the 5 precepts of Islam. I haven't heard of one of these Bible bangers yet wanting to have the 5 precepts of Islam up in the courtroom. So I think that they're going to win. I think that the Supreme Court's pretty good on that issue, that you cannot have the 10 commandments up. They've allowed some funding of, Mark, they've allowed some funding of religious schools. If everybody gets grading on their entrance, then the Catholic school gets grading on their entrance too. And there's some things with textbooks where they'll pay for textbooks, all from the bar exam review, Mark, many, many years ago. So don't take this to the bank, but there are certainly some things that they can do that you could argue support religion and support particular religions. But the 10 commandments up in the classroom is too far. That will be struck down. If it gets to the U.S. Supreme Court, it will be struck down by the lower courts. And that's true even in Louisiana and Texas, because the precedents are clear enough that you can't put the 10 commandments up. It's religious indoctrination, Mark.
I get it. I'll just read this and then I will try to just parry back at you for a moment. But
Parry.
The judge in this decision said, quote, even though the 10 commandments would not be affirmatively taught, the captive audience of students likely would have questions which teachers would feel compelled to answer. That is what they do. The displays are likely to pressure the child against, this is what the judge wrote. Plaintiffs into religious the child, that is to say, plaintiffs into religious observance, meditation on, veneration, and adoption of the state's favored religious scripture, and into suppressing expression of their own religious or non-religious background and beliefs, at least while they're at school. There is also insufficient evidence of a broader tradition of using the 10 commandments in public education. There is no tradition of permanently displaying the 10 commandments in public school classrooms. There are ways in which students can be taught any relevant history of the 10 commandments without the state selecting an official version of scripture, approving it in state law, and then displaying it in every classroom on a permanent basis. So that is the judge's decision. In the Supreme,
school is not Sunday school.
Right.
School
but in the Supreme Court, isn't there a disposition among the controlling justices toward religious doctrine? And at minimum, it's innocuous quality, and it's not really a problem. It's like, if we're not telling them they have to worship, we're just putting it up there. And worse, isn't there a tendency on the part of those controlling justices toward actually wanting to get some religiosity into the culture of America?
I just think on the 10 commandments, on this particular issue, the law is clear enough. Not that they've always followed precedent.
I mean, yeah, they gave the president. They gave the president immunity, David.
But on this, and that's another outrage. But this is clear enough, okay. Mark. This one's clear enough that the Supreme Court will not change, in my opinion. But what they have been doing is they've been doing things like the Hobby Lobby case. They've said, okay, they can exercise their religion in ways that I wouldn't have agreed with. And when it comes down to hospitals, they've said that hospitals don't have to perform certain kind of services. And then they say, come on, there must be somebody there who is not against their religion to perform an abortion. What do you mean? Because it's a religiously funded or religiously founded hospital, it doesn't have to either perform abortions or do other things that, and the Supreme Court they've sort of bounced around on that. But these are not their most, let's put it this way, they've done a lot more outrageous things than what they're going to do on this case.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying.
Small comfort.
You can take that both ways. Like they'll rule either way. I don't know. I'm out of time, David Katz. Love talking to you. Thank you for being here. Jeanette says, when will they want a big, beautiful picture of Trump in every classroom, every hospital, everywhere? I'm going to be sick thinking about that. Jeanette, obviously not a Trump fan. That's an interesting question, though, that Jeanette sort of provokes, which is, that wouldn't be, you could have a picture of the President of the United States in every classroom. There's nothing wrong with that.
I think you probably could, on the theory that he's the president of all the people. There'd be an awful lot of protests about it, and there would be. I don't know what school it would make a whole lot of sense for, but they may do it. In these towns where there's big, and in every federal courthouse and a lot of other federal buildings, there's a huge picture of Trump and Vance, just like there used to be of Biden and Harris.
Oh, sure,
and
of course. Yeah, I mean,
that's avert your eyes. You just avert your eyes when you go in or out.
But I mean,
January 20th.
The case would be over political speech, I guess, and should political speech be there? But I think you'd likely get away with it without any problem. David, I love.
You know what kids would do? You know what kids would do? They'd throw spitballs and everything else. As soon as the teacher turned around. So
you can imagine the fights, the MAGA kids against the anti-MAGA kids. Oh my God!
It would be fraught. It would be fraught, Mark.
David, love you as the audience does. Great seeing you here, and I look forward to next Thursday. Thank you, David. One last thing,
we had a wonderful lunch. Mark and I had a wonderful lunch this week.
Yes, we did.
We had a great time in. Do you mind saying? At Art's Deli.
At Art's Deli in Studio City, California.
Be willing to bet my lunch that there's alcohol involved.
There was no alcohol involved. Katz loaded up on some. Katz is a very lean man. Like you're in good shape. I think you're a swimmer or something, aren't you?
I am a swimmer. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Saying that. You're in good shape, Mark. This is a mutual admiration society.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I really had fun. And hello, Kim.
Girl, you just woo.
Yeah.
Kim, are you going to pop out?
Yeah, Kim is, there she is. Mark, please ask Katz if our normal checks and balances will be at risk in a post-Trump U.S. government. I had that same question last week, and we didn't answer it. So, all right.
Okay, can I try it real quick, please? If our normal checks and balances. No, I think
at risk in a post-Trump U.S. government. Will our normal checks and balances still be at risk, or will they be at risk? I don't. Yeah.
No,
okay.
and I think Trump can't pardon everybody. And remember, the presidential immunity case only applies to Trump. It doesn't apply to any of his minions. It doesn't apply to some of those INS, those ICE agents. We'll figure out who they were behind their masks. We'll figure out who were there. We'll figure out, who harassed that kid, the one who died on the 210 freeway here just recently. The one that they got so terrified that he jumped off.
He ran from them. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's true. But I mean, danger. What do they say? If you do things like that, it invites danger. That's a dangerous situation. And they ought to figure out someone's going to go this way, someone's going to go that way. With their billions and billions of dollars of budget, they should post somebody to make sure that those things can't happen. They had somebody on a rooftop who got so scared he ran, and the roof was too high. You could say, well, my God, why would they panic that much? Well, if your whole life in America, you've been here 20, 25 years, your kids were here, your significant other or wife was here, and you knew you're going to be torn away from them and torn out of a country that you'd gotten used to and where you're making an honest living, just doing a day's labor. Yeah, you might panic too.
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand why they panic. Okay, we're out of time here. Why do I keep getting these questions for Katz? Give me a break. Inlays says, Katz, please explain the ramifications to the world if Russia takes all of Ukraine. People act like it's no big deal.
The good news is that Russia is not going to take all of Ukraine, but under this folly of Trump's, they would take about 20%. They'd have no assurance of being in NATO. Supposedly, they're going to be posting security guarantees. That means like real European and U.S. troops, so that if Putin tried to do again what he's done to so many countries, and he broke his word again with the Ukraine deal that might be made, that he would have to basically start World War III. And I don't think the U.S. and especially Trump are going to post anybody over there enough to make it be World War III. So in a couple
I will tell
years,
you what is happening in Ukraine.
They go right back in.
I'll tell you, Katz. I will tell everybody. Let me tell you what's happening in Ukraine. I've said it. Donald Trump is walking backward away from Ukraine. He's realizing that this isn't a photo op situation where he can just roll out a red carpet, set up a flyover, meet Vladimir Putin and give him a ride in his presidential limo, and then take a victory lap and pick up a Nobel Peace Prize. He's realizing that he doesn't know the history, and he's fired all the people who have the history of these regions. The State Department has been cored out, but he gets that this is complicated. Vladimir Putin keeps talking about how NATO provoked it. I got the European leaders here. I just want out of this whole thing. And he is walking back. And watch, he's going to foist this situation onto NATO and to the European Union, and he's going to foist it onto Putin, and he's going to add Zelensky and say, you guys work it out. I've done all I can here. There's no reason that this thing should be continuing. And I, Donald Trump, I didn't start this thing. If I'd been in power, it never would have happened, blah, blah, blah. And then he's going to walk it out. And I'm telling you, he's going to wash his hands of this situation. That's what's going to happen. There's
Mark,
no
one very last
peace deal
thing.
that's going to be made.
One very last thing. If the Europeans will pay for it, and that's one of the reasons that Trump is doing the right thing at the moment, because NATO has said that they will spend real live Europeans' money to buy our American armaments to send over to Ukraine. That's pretty tempting to not Trump, God knows what Trump is thinking, but to his backers who are going to make a lot of money off of selling that stuff. That was a pretty good one. And if the Europeans keep spending money, that's what they have to do. They have wonderful social nets, but they have to spend money on the defense budget and save Ukraine. There's still time, but they have to be saving Ukraine now and spending money, the Europeans, to do it.
Well, the two things you said are really important, and we've noted. You know, when we say we're selling them weapons, it's not the American people who gain anything from that. It's defense contractors who gain something from that. But as David has pointed out, they're Trump's supporters, and they're in the orbit of Trump. So he's happy to take care of them. But I also think then that you're looking at a continued war of attrition, and sadly, Russia is likely to win that war of attrition. But we can continue on this.
There aren't that many resources. No, and Russia's hard pressed. Russia's hard pressed. They can't keep it up that much longer. So the Europeans got to hang in there.
I'm back and forth on that. Who's got the upper hand? But we'll continue with it another time. David, so appreciate you, and thank you for being here.
Great being with you. Hey, Tim.
All right.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.